welcome to another edition of Flashback to the Track. This is probably edition like 41, so shout out to Chip Ganassi, because why not? 41. It's James, and obviously we're always joined with Mark, because, it's tag team. We're like the Road Warriors, Animal and Hawk. I don't know which one you would be, Mark, because you never watched wrestling. So
no, I didn't. I always thought of us more as like the American Gladiators, like Pyro and Gyro or whatever the hell their names were. But
see, I never watched that.
You never watched American? Oh my god! You know that show that's on that JJ Watt hosts, Extreme Tag or whatever.
Sort of, yeah.
So it's like that, but it was like not crappy. Yeah, American Gladiators. Go on YouTube, watch American Gladiators. But you know what? We're not talking about American Gladiators tonight. We're actually going to review some races and talk about an event that happened in the past several times, the Toyota All-Star Showdown, which was a NASCAR AutoZone Elite Division race. That's what we call the K&N now, right? Well, it was actually a group of races, all that happened on one day at Irwindale in California, Toyota Speedway at Irwindale.
Yeah.
So go ahead. Just explain this. You kind of wrote this down to kind of give people an outline. Go ahead. Hello, Samson, James's cat. What's going on?
Yeah, he jumped in my lap. Sorry. So yeah, just a brief overview. So this was unfortunately an event that Mark never really watched. It's okay. It's okay. It's short track racing.
Well, because you know where I live, right? And it wasn't really on TV here.
Hey, man, if you've got nothing going on in November, January, I mean, this is good racing to watch. But it was a little bit of you had to be in the know to know like what was going on with the series. And it was kind of like that when I was researching it. I actually thought there were more links and news articles to these events, but there weren't. So the Toyota All-Star Showdown was basically a non-points event that brought together the top drivers of the stock car ranks across America and what moved to be across North America. It was tabbed as the Daytona 500 of short track racing. And it actually brought together NASCAR's regional series and divisions for one season event, either at the end of the season or to be the beginning of the season. And it was really more of a showcase, basically, of the best drivers in stock car racing, primarily in the K&N division and the K&N cars. And as we've heard Matt Tiff talk about on the show before, who doesn't love a high horsepower car with just the right amount of downforce? You know what I'm talking about, Mark?
Yeah, exactly. Not, 550 horsepower with a boatload of downforce. Because if you ask any driver or race engineer, they'll tell you that racing with high downforce and low horsepower is terrible. So, and that's where we're at. Although we did get to see an absolute banger at Talladega today. That was one of the best speedway races I've ever watched. So they nailed the super speedway package because that was unbelievable. So
they did. So like you said, Mark, with this, there was a couple races that were in the showdown. One was, at the time, it was the NASCAR AutoZone Elite Division.
Remember the commercials with Kurt Busch for the NASCAR AutoZone Elite Division?
Oh, they're so cringe, but yes.
They were incredibly cringe.
Yeah, that's, no offense, Kurt, but he wasn't the prime actor he would evolve into. He was seasoning himself for acting prowess. But the Elite Division was this mixture of basically Southern and Western competitors, and they would basically accumulate points through an accumulation of average finishes throughout the season. They took the top drivers in this division and they let them have like what was normally a preliminary main event, but it was still like a main feature race. And for a while, this series existed from pretty much 1991 till about 2006. And from 91, most people would remember it as the Slim Jim All Pro Series. Most people understood it as like a southeastern division. So it was really more regional, very much in the southeast. But then you also had like a group of people in the West Coast that competed with the same kind of cars that were in the All Pro division. So that's how this race basically came together. And then you had the main event race. That was a northwest shootout for the Busch North and West Series. And that was basically a divisional rank that ran either on either side of the on the Mississippi, basically. They had two states, I believe, that they shared and ran companion races at times throughout the season. But this was their big showcase where it was like, who was the best of I just keep saying East and West. Who was the best of the
North
West and the North?
and the North.
Yeah, because
best of the West. That rhymes.
Best of the West. Well, it's weird because like it's changed names so many times, especially to where it is today. But like right at this point in time when the races were first being like made, the West and the North series were the regions or divisions it was like known for. So they would take the top 15 in each of the points division finishers from the season, and those guys would get invites to this. And it was invite only for this event, so only those 15 drivers would compete. So there was no like go or go home, none of that. No, invite only if you were only getting the 15.
And the thing is, like, this was kind of like the big race. Like, this was all the top guys. These were guys you're going to see in the Cup Series, guys that are on development contracts with, at the time, DEI, RCR, Roush, Joe Gibbs Racing. But that race was the first of the three races in the evening. It wasn't even the big one. The big one was that AutoZone Elite Division, that Elite Division, that late model race. That was the big race. And I remember in the 2009 edition, it ran in January 2009. Technically, it is referred to on Racing Reference as the 2008 edition, but it happened was like January 7th or something, 2009. It was the last event of the 2008 season, even though it happened in 2009. There were 52 cars that showed up to qualify for that race. All the qualifying sessions got rained out, and NASCAR said, screw it, start them all. We don't want anyone to have to go home. And they started 52 cars at Irwindale. So really cool that they would do that. And like we said, the event was kind of historically held in November, but sometimes it would be, it ended up being later on. But it was like weeks before the long-running, like open wheel, like season-ending event, which was the Turkey Night Grand Prix, which happened at Thanksgiving because Turkey, right? So even though Thanksgiving's in October, not in November, just saying.
No, Thanksgiving's in November.
No, it's in October. Actually, it's the second.
For us.
It's the second weekend of October. Yeah, I know, crazy, right? And
That's
you don't get
that's
2
just
days
true to
off. You
Canadian
don't get a
stuff.
Thursday and Friday off. You only get Monday off. So the first Showdown was in 2003. So that was like the inaugural Showdown race. It was a 30-car field determined by 2 qualifying races. They ran 125 laps around Irwindale. And like James said, it was gathering a 15 Busch North and 15 Busch West Series competitors. And it was just, let's figure out the best of the rest. It was like North versus the West, which is like kind of like a weird Civil War offshoot. I don't know.
Yeah.
North versus West.
I guess well, did the West ever win? I guess if they ever won a conflict, so I guess the North won a conflict. So I guess like
the West had
rehashing-
Cowboys, so that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I don't know, I guess, but it was like this interesting concept because at this time there weren't really those big developmental teams. There weren't the Joe Gibbs Racings and the DEIs and all these teams. There were a lot more regional competitors. So for them, this was a big showcase. This was a big chance for them to claim that pride and to have that tote to be like, yeah, I was the best, the all-star showcase. And it meant a lot because like we said, this was an invite-only event. So the prestige of just getting an invite alone to either the super late model or to the K&N race was big. Moving over to 2004, the format would change slightly from 2003. Only 25 laps would be added, so it'd actually go from 125 to 150 laps. There'd be a 10-minute break at lap 100, basically allowing the drivers and teams to adjust the cars, fuel them as needed to make sure they can run all 150 laps. And it's basically a 50-lap dash right there to the end. And there was an inversion at the lap 100 break that saw the top 8 cars be inverted. And unfortunately, in that race, it basically cost David Gilliland the win. And so.
Was it a random invert? Did they know it was the top 8?
This dude comes out. Like this guy that they pick as a fan, and he wins this contest to draw the invert. And the invert is on 3 boards that sit next to a Toyota Tundra pickup, and there's these 3 models there. They are attractive and beautiful women, but this man has to make it a point that he's picking a specific model because he likes the way she looks, and not only does he like the way she looks, but he's very certain that the audience likes the way she looks too, because he's pretty vocal about that. So he picks that girl, and behind that board was the number 8.
Okay, so it was like how they did the All-Star race back then when they would do the invert. It was just like Steve Burns would like randomly.
Just a little more tacky. Yeah,
yeah. So that would not fly in 2020.
No,
just saying,
no.
That would not jive. So 2005, 2006, we roll down to those races, and the format and length are the same, but they're not going to do an invert now. So the invert was too gimmicky, but the 10 best finishing drivers at both break would also get a bonus, with the North drivers claiming the bonus for the second year in a row in 2006. Mike Olson would cross the line first, only to be stripped of the victory later after a disqualification. And David Gilliland went on to win that edition of the race. Sorry, that was 2005 or 2006?
That was 2005.
So he won it in 2005. That's right.
Yeah, that was the first time there was ever like a disqualification in this event. And Mike Olson's team, I believe they were disqualified in tech afterwards. I remember this car specifically, Mark, because if you look at it too, it's like one of the few cars you could ever replicate in like NASCAR 06 Total Team Control, because like the sponsorship is like Realtree, and the two-tone of the paint scheme is like basically the second livery option in the game that you could make. So I always remembered this car because I would always replicate it in the game. But yeah, Mike Olson was stripped at the end. I don't even exactly know why, but he was basically credited with last place in that race. David Gilliland was the winner. Sweet redemption for him from the year before. Now, 2007. Now, this is a big year because, NASCAR is going extreme in 2007. And so is Toyota, because it's their big year. They got their car, their Camry, racing now in the Busch and the Cup Series. So the race length, man, that's just going to jump. That's going to jump from 150 laps to 250 laps. There will still be a 10-minute break. Now there's going to be 2, though, at lap 100 and lap 200, which would help break down the pit strategy. So basically, if you're a crew chief and you're calling this race, you understand that you can only basically work on your car under the approved caution laps and periods, which are basically when NASCAR is like throwing a actual yellow, not a quickie yellow, or you have these breaks. So you're only going to get your adjustments on these brakes. So you only have these 2 shots to really work on your car. Then you have a 50-lap shootout at the end. You only get 1 set of tires per segment, so you're going to have a fresher set towards the end for that last 50 laps. Now, the field was set to 40 starters now this year instead of the 30. 26 of them were set on qualifying time, with 8 provisionals, and 6 came from a last chance qualifying race. So there weren't any qualifying races in this edition, but there were a qualifying session and an LCQ. But now here's a good twist. With this race, the champions of NASCAR's Canadian, Mexico Series, Whelen All-American, Whelen Modified, and Whelen Weekly Racing Series were all invited as guaranteed starters of this race, which added great diversity, because this was considered at the time NASCAR's developmental or diversity series, which was great because you had like a showcase of like these different drivers from different backgrounds and disciplines in K&N cars. You know what I mean, Mark?
Yeah, it was really cool to see, like, and guys coming from walks of life, like the Mexico Series, the Canadian Tire Series, or it says the Pinty Series it's known now, like that aren't used to driving maybe this type of car, and on this type of setup as well. This Irwindale Speedway, the Pinty Series is mostly road courses and very short ovals, 3/8 mile ovals, very short tracks, and the Mexico Series obviously being road courses. They do have some oval tracks, so it's just cool to see these guys come over, and especially like Whelen Modified guys. Maybe they've never driven a late model car, and they're gonna come over here and drive a late model stock and race in this race. So it's really cool to see them do something that just opens it up for diversity, and it's a cool thing to see in the sport. That you see all these guys coming from different walks of life and competing against each other. It's awesome.
No, I mean that's basically what makes racing so cool, is that it's a melting pot, and it really shouldn't matter about what's your background. It's just a matter of like getting behind the wheel and getting up on it and doing your business. And the business of this race was big because of like the length and everything. Now we go into 2008 and 2009. Now this is the year the infamous year, as we said, where the race was moved from its November date to January. So it was always
Yeah, it was actually
technically
January 23rd, 24th.
yeah.
I said 6th, 7th. I got confused. It was 23rd, 24th.
It's okay. You're so used to your roar before the 24th, sir.
I am. That's what I was thinking of.
It's okay. The like Mark said, the move of this was to say, oh, it's truly the last race of the racing season for these competitors in this division, because this is kind of like the last race for a while on the West Coast before like the East Coast stuff starts really picking up again, because of course you have the Daytona 500 and the month rolls on. Racing in Florida picks up because of speed weeks. So there's like a shift a little bit from the West to the East Coast for racing. Though to me it was already to me at the end of the season, so I don't know why. But the 2008 one, or 2009, however you want to call it, was a showdown with an infamous finish. I mean, Mark, this was one I specifically pointed out to you, man. I was like, dude, you got to check this.
So I watched the whole thing, and this race was unbelievable. So this race had James, it's time for our favorite segment, Strange Starters.
Strange Starters.
So, drivers that appeared. Let's go starting lineup. Now,
Okay.
we'll just list them off. Drivers that appeared in this race. Well, just the interesting ones. Jason Bowles, Brian Eichler. Remember Brian Eichler?
Oh,
Trevor Bayne,
That's a good one.
2011 Daytona 500 winner. This is back when he was a DEI development driver. And then halfway through that season, he jumped ship to Michael Waltrip and then jumped ship to Roush. He was a development driver for 3 different teams.
It just, to me, it doesn't make sense. How about another developmental driver? Mark Davis, okay? One of the original diversity drivers from the Joe Gibbs Racing Diversity Program. That's an interesting one. How about this guy? He's a veteran, Ron Hornaday Jr.
Ron Hornaday is in this race.
Yeah.
Antonio Perez from the Mexico Series. Obviously, Joey Logano, Eddie McDonald, Alex Kennedy. Later on, he's going to make Cup starts in his career. Augie Vidovich is a short track guy, Truck Series guy. Austin Dillon's in this race.
You even got Matt Crafton, all right, future Truck Series champion in there. Future Xfinity regular Jamie Dick is in there. How about Winston Cup veteran Steve Park? That's right,
Steve
back when Park. Yeah, when he was making some,
he was doing
East Series starts.
I think he was doing full time in a waste management
that's how he
sponsored
got
car.
He was strong on the East Series. Ricky Carmichael in his development time with KHI.
This was one of the first first late model races he ever ran. First NASCAR races. Matt Kobiluck, Jim Englebright is in this race, legendary West Series guy. Scott Steckley from the Canada Series. John Borneman is in this race. Fun fact about John Borneman: he has a top 5 finish in Xfinity at Talladega. Yeah, bet you didn't know that. Jarrett Johnson is in this race, driving for Armando Fitz. This race had literally everyone. And then the guys that didn't qualify. Stan Silva Jr., Blake Cook of Filter Time fame.
Dakota Armstrong.
Dakota Armstrong. He was a Penske development driver for a while. Daryl Haar, another Canadian driver. So all these guys didn't qualify for the race. So that is a ridiculous lineup. So really fun amount of strange starters there. Didn't go into huge detail on a lot of them, but it's just cool to see how many guys were in this race and how many of them went on to have careers, other places that you don't even really think about. Guys that you forgot about. Yeah.
Oh yeah. One fun fact too was that DEI had to pick between their drivers to go to attend this event, because Eric Almirola technically could have went and attended for DEI, but instead they went with Trevor Bayne. So, there's just so many other drivers too that kind of are on rotation to almost be in this event. It's just a very prestigious and very hard to, just get into this event. It's very fortunate, and you got to be very lucky to get in. Now, let's go to 2010. And here's where probably Mark and I are going to bro out here, because we're going to be real. In 2010, now this race specifically, Mark, I remember watching this race, and I wasn't the hugest fan of it because I just didn't appreciate that Joey Logano was in this race for some reason. I mean, Joey Logano was a Cup Series rookie. You know, why is he competing against these drivers in the regional divisions?
Yeah, he's the 2010 Cup Series, Rookie of the Year. He's driving a Chevy, sponsored by the Home Depot, which is weird because he's a Toyota driver.
Well, I mean, the bodies, I guess, were just too fire to give up unless you were just going to destroy them. So
yeah, it's another year with just a crazy lineup of drivers. But he really, I guess he gets invited as a prior winner of the event, because he won it twice before. Well, he didn't win it because he got disqualified, but he won it in 2000. Before, yeah. He won it in 2007. But yeah, just this why why is he out there? It just doesn't make sense to me. Really had no interest. But there's other guys there too. Like David Gilliland was in that race too. He's a Cup Series driver. You could say the same for why is Ron Hornaday in this race? Why are any of these guys in this race? But I get it. He was the Cup Series Rookie of the Year, so it didn't look good. And look at that. He led 171 laps and won the race. Go figure.
Yeah, and it's to me, after the performance he had the year before, it would have been better to just see, a new winner. And obviously, in this time period, no one had heard of Sergio Pena. And that's another thing about this race is it didn't just legitimize drivers. It gave drivers a chance to get their name out there, to have a showcase, to get that next level ride. Something we heard kind of in our last episode, Peyton Sellers, Sergio Pena got a leg up because of a good run in this race. There's a lot of really great competition throughout. You could look through the finishing results. I mean, Matt DiBenedetto came home fourth, and he was driving for Mike Curb. Mike Curb's always got some strong equipment. All right,
Mike Curb's just got his hands in so many different racing enterprises. Mike Curb's another Menards guy, man. He's just getting his hand there. He's oh, I own part of that and part of that and part of that. So I like Mike Curb a lot. Puts lots of money into motorsports. Good man.
He's a good man. I mean, he was Pauly Rocca's car owner here too, and Pauly got a top 10 as well, finished 9th. And who else got a top 10? That wily old veteran, Steve Park.
Steve Park, the man. Not a bust, man. Steve Park.
Totally not a bust. And that's another thing too. We want to talk about busts or beasts. How about a beast, Matt Kobaluk? Because in this one he finishes 3rd. The year prior he wins it. He's a guy. If you look at the statistics of this event, is constantly in the top 5.
He's got 2 wins.
East Series driver.
2 wins in this event, 2006 and 2008/9, whatever you want to call it. Obviously, he was handed that win because Logano was disqualified, but he finished 2nd, and Logano got disqualified, so he wins. And Matt Kobaluk's been a great driver. He's done some Xfinity racing as well. Usually, whenever they do the races in the north, Watkins Glen, Loudon, places like that. And he's just a great driver, a career Busch North Series driver, or what you would now call ARCA East, I guess. So he's just one of the guys who made a career out of it. And when we talk to Peyton Sellers, there's lots of guys that just want to make a career out of those lower racing series. And I'm kind of hoping that in the next few years we're going to see more of that. We're going to see some veteran Cup guys maybe take a step back and run Xfinity or just run trucks for a couple of years, because I think we're really missing that is our regulars, our veteran regulars in those series.
Yeah, I reckon back to Randy LaJoy. I think that's a really great person because he was one of the drivers who's very outspoken about, I don't mind just running Busch Series. To him, it was fine. And another person as well as Michael McLaughlin was very adamant about that. And those are guys that you would see, come through the Busch North ranks and were champions of that. They made it to a really great point of success. They don't need to make it any higher. I mean, they proved to themselves, to be there is great. And, just to be in these fields too is great. And it's just amazing to see that there's not that many regulars anymore. And I'd wished we'd see it other than just the independent runners that we see with Jeremy Clemens and Ryan Sieg in the Xfinity Series. We'd like to see more of those, true regulars in both the trucks and the Xfinity Series, because that's what really makes these series so great, is storylines like that.
Yeah, for sure, I agree with you. And, hopefully we'll get there again.
Yeah,
But moving to the
but
2011 race,
the final
um,
one, that was an interesting one now, Mark, because like there's this article I found, and I'll pull it up again for us both to look at really quick while we watch our podcast here.
so I'm looking at the results of this race, and this was an interesting one. Another one where we had like a just ridiculous amount of diverse drivers. We had
Oh yeah,
A French driver in this race from
there was
France.
yeah, I don't know if that was technically a part of NASCAR's Euro Series at the time, but they did win a number of stock car championships in Europe, so the invitation was sent.
We did have a driver from Brazil. We had 3 drivers from Mexico and 1
Yeah,
driver
Miguel
from Canada.
Paludo, if I'm not mistaken,
Miguel
was from
Paludo, Daniel Suarez, Herman Quiroga was in this race. 2 Canadian drivers, Andrew
and that's
Ranger and DJ Kennington.
Lucas Lassier, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
Lassier, is that it?
I
Am I
think
saying
so,
that right?
yeah.
He was our Frenchman in number 81. You know, my favorite starter. He's an American, but he's a diverse person. Travis Pastrana, man.
Travis Pastrana driving the
Travis
Boost
Pastrana.
Mobile car for Michael
Not,
Waltrip.
not to mention, probably just like weeks prior to this guy was doing a promo for his, Boost Mobile Xfinity Michael Waltrip Pastrana racing effort, where he's doing like backflip can kickers over his Xfinity car. Now he's gonna run in his Can car. Like, this dude's extreme, and he's got nerves of steel. But man, Mark, probably one of the favorites of this race. He's a Canadian boy, DJ Kennington.
My man, DJ Kennington. DJ Kennington is a staple. If you don't know about DJ Kennington, so he's a staple in the Pinty series. He owns his own team called DJK Racing. He's the guy who fields cars for all the truck series drivers that have never raced at CTMP before. When they come up here, usually development drivers, guys like Riley Herbst, Jeb Burton did in the past, people like that, will run one of his cars in the Pinty series race at CTMP. And he fields a Dodge factory team because there's no Toyota yet in Pinty's. It's just Dodge, Chevy, and Ford. So he fields a Dodge factory team, and guys will come up and drive his car. He actually got some shots of Riley Herbst racing there last year, in one of his cars. And he's a great contributor to the sport. He's a champion of the series. And he actually finished second in this race, which is incredible for him to go down there. And he actually did get a couple opportunities in the Xfinity Series and the Truck Series, never driving for very competitive teams. And eventually was the first driver for Gaunt Brothers Racing in the Cup Series, in the 96 car. Drove in the Daytona 500 for them, did some other speedway races. Now they've kind of got their deal with Toyota, and now Daniel Suarez is driving for them. But DJ was their first driver, and DJ's he's just a great ambassador for the sport in Canada and in the United States.
Yeah, and I mean, you talk about having success in this race and how it could propel you forward. I mean, finishing second in this race to Jason Bowles, who finally captures victory, which was big for him in this final Toyota All-Star Showdown. Kennington puts his name on the map because obviously, no offense to what he's doing, but he's not getting the same recognition that he would be getting in the U.S. racing in Canada. And it's just because of exposure, man, But, having this exposure as the Daytona 500 of short track racing, that was big for him. Travis Pastrana to me was this was a huge legitimate moment to say, this is Travis Pastrana's time. He's going to take this seriously. He is a stock car racer. As a fan, I was really behind Travis, after this run, and it proved a lot because it was it was a very grueling race I can remember. And that's what's cool with these last couple of Toyota All-Star Showdowns. They're more accessible online, so we can actually go back and watch them. And also that Boost Mobile 99 car looked fire, especially with the low-key 1 in front of the 99 on the paint scheme. Subtle and nice. There was an interesting article I found about this race, and it was actually a Bleacher Report article. I put it in there if you want to check it out, and it's 10 things I couldn't wait to see at Irwindale, specifically about this race. And that was another thing I remembered about this race, was there was more hype about this showdown than ever before. Last year Sergio Pena broke out from nowhere and made a name for himself, and normally that was another big item to understand, was who was going to be this next driver to come in and break out this year. Obviously, to me, it was Andrew Ranger and Travis Pastrana. Um, those were the two biggest ones that jumped out to me when you really think back to this race. Um, but like, I thought a really interesting aspect that they looked into it, which was another one of our strange starters that we always like to point out. This unknown who was Darrell Wallace Jr.
Darrell Wallace Jr.,
Yeah,
or as we know him, Bubba Wallace.
Bubba
Driving
Wallace.
back then with Toyota. He was a Toyota development guy in their diversity program. And, he would go on to race for Kyle Busch Motorsports, be a Joe Gibbs guy, then moved on to Roush, and now, of course, he's with Richard Petty Motorsports in the Cup Series. And doing some pretty incredible things considering the situation that he's in at Petty, not being the most competitive of teams. But, Bubba, at this point in his career, was just incredibly competitive, being in good equipment. Man, when he was in the Truck Series, just tearing it up. Just absolutely going bonkers. I remember in 2017 when he was kind of between rides, because I remember he lost the ride with Roush because he didn't have a sponsor. When he enters one truck race with MDM Motorsports in Michigan, boom, wins the race. Just when you put him in good stuff, he was really good. And at this point, he was very unknown. Not a lot of people really knew who he was. Obviously, being an African-American driver, that did draw him some attention, being basically the only African-American driver in the field. And as he still is today, not a lot of diversity there, but, to see him, obviously wasn't really a factor in this race, lost an engine on lap 61, so he didn't really compete very well in this race, qualified 13th, but didn't get the finish he was hoping for, unfortunately. But, it's good. We're happy to know he went on to have a very successful career. I would call it a very successful career.
Yeah, so far, I mean, the thing is, it's just because you win this race or have success in this race doesn't necessarily translate to success further on. But having participated in this race does allow you the chance to participate and have success, because it's just a stepping stone. Another aspect of 2011 that was interesting too, Stephen Wallace was in this race. We kind of arc back to drivers with a lot of experience in this race. But as Mark said, it's a melting pot. So Stephen's in this race.
Driving the South Point Hotel and Casino car.
For probably Rusty Wallace.
He's listed as the owner. He's listed as the owner, Steve Wallace.
Oh, man. So now, with this, he actually has a good run. He finishes top 10. And, this was kind of at this point in his career where he was kind of bowing out slowly from stock car racing. But he was trying to prove himself as well, to say, hey, I can still do it. I think he did a pretty good job with that, because that was another storyline coming into this event as well.
Yeah, he's kind of another driver I think of where I remember I posted a fact about his career where it took him something like 58 starts to get a top 10 or something like that in Xfinity. It was might have even been 70 some starts. I think it was his third full season he finally got a top 10, and it was like a 10th at Mexico. But then he really started knocking them off. He was the kind of driver where he'd win 4 poles in a year and have no top 10s. Or he'd win the pole at Bristol, but he'd get passed on lap 1. So he could qualify really well. But eventually he figured it out. He never did win a race. Another guy kind of reminds me of him was Brian Scott, another driver where he had talent, but he knew he was never able to pull off a victory. And I guess Brian won in the Truck Series a couple times, but Steve was never able to pull off a victory in NASCAR. And he was a talented driver, but I think, being in the shadow of his father, it was tough. He got a lot of, flack from fans. I don't think that the fan love was ever really there for him. He just sort of started making the decision that, maybe I'm going to slowly bow out. I remember he ran the Daytona 500 in 2011. It was his only ever Cup start. Kind of interesting to see him run this race, but, why not? Have some fun.
Yeah, I mean, he finished ahead of Daniel Suarez and Germán Quiroga, our Mexican series competitors, which is great to see them and to see that diversity. We also had, of course,
Chad Boat was in this race.
Chad Boat, yep. And that was what I was going to mention, was because one thing that was brought up was Kevin Swindell being in this race, because he had competed with Mike Curb. I think it was with a Evernham developmental thing, and that never materialized for him to get into this race from what I could see. But I did see that Chad Boat was in this race, and I was like, oh, there's another one of those open wheel competitors. from the short track ranks. What could he do, especially with a guy like Mike Curb? Uh, Obviously, they did pretty well. And Mike Curb, again, fueling the car for Polly Haraka as well. So look at him, Mike Curb with the diversity right there.
Chad Boat, son of Billy Boat.
Billy Boat.
Billy Boat, our favorite IndyCar driver name ever, Billy Boat. But yeah, that's
only because he drove for AJ, man.
Yeah,
AJ
well, yeah. Come on. But then he drove the 90. But then Chad Boat drove the 98 in this race, Parnelli's number. So,
I mean, that's Mike's number 2, though. So
yeah, I'm just gonna say. So we talked about Mike Curb before. If there's a race car number 98 in any series, Mike Curb probably has ownership stake in that car. Just want to say
98 or 43.
Like, he's got ownership stake in that car. Like the 98 Brian Herta Autosport Hyundai in IMSA. He's involved with that team. It has a Curb Records logo on it. Like it's the 98 truck, the ThorSport truck. He's got ownership stake in that truck. So he's all over the place, man. That Mike Curb guy. But we appreciate what Mike Curb does.
At least he's consistent with his numbers.
He was involved with Dan Weldon's win in the 2011 Indy 500 as well. Part owner on that car. So,
yeah,
Mike Curb just being the man. So these are the fun facts that we bring you while we ramble on way off topic on our podcast.
Way off. So let's wrap it up with what we've kind of learned now since we've looked at the final showdown and the results. You look back at it, 8 showdowns in total, all held at Irwindale Speedway. Eventually, this event would be succeeded by what was called the UNOH. Man, it's such a weird
University of Northern Ohio.
Such a weird school name. Battle at the Beach, which lasted only 2 seasons. It was held in the back straightaway at Daytona International Speedway. Very interesting setup to just make a track out of nothing instead of going to a track just because everybody's at Daytona International Speedway while you got speedways going on. Man, Mark, that was confusing and annoying. Just looking back at it, I don't know why NASCAR did that. I have no idea.
Yeah. No bueno.
No, it was not a good time. But looking back at what was the All-Star Showdown, to me, what started was the battle of the North and the West to the battle of all the best regional drivers in NASCAR to a grand showcase that was unmatched by anything. Man, this thing grew to something huge.
Yeah, it did, and it got national attention, and it was on live television, and it's awesome. So good to see, and it's a shame we don't see anything like this. It really, you look at now at NASCAR's regional series, and it doesn't look good right now, man. For the future, like I watched the ARCA race at Talladega the other week, and 20 cars entered and 5 on the lead lap at the 40 lap break they had, halfway break. Like it was just not looking good. The numbers are better when they do short track racing, obviously, but it's like we talked about in our podcast with Peyton Sellers, man. Support your local short track and support the small series like that because they are what create the next great drivers. And I grew up in an area where there isn't a lot of short track racing, but man, like if I had more short track racing near me, I would be supporting the crap out of it because we need these series to succeed and we need to get the next crop of great drivers. You know what I mean? Like people keep complaining about pay drivers and there's no talent in the series. Well, you know what? Go support your local short track, okay? Or they're not going to be any good drivers in the next series.
Yeah. I mean, there is that factor, of course. Like, it's up to the fans to go out there and support something. But to me, it depends on the regions and it depends what's going on because now it's more so out of NASCAR's hands as far as like what's going on. There used to be a lot of these smaller divisions that NASCAR ran or NASCAR had some kind of overseeing or oversight as a sanctioning body. And now it's really come down to just the ARCA Menard series and, a bunch of other smaller series that basically make up the regions. And every region has its own motorsports discipline. Obviously, when you go out west, there's a lot of late models, super late models. You go up north, there's a lot more modifieds. You come down south, you get more super late model and late models as well. It depends on the region. It depends on what you like and where it is. But I think what this was as a showcase for all drivers. I think we should get back towards that. If NASCAR wants to make something cool with their product they've got with the ARCA cars, they should like make a IROC of short track racing, but with
No,
ARCA cars.
that's a
That would
great
be
idea.
cool.
They
Yeah.
should have an event, even if it's on All-Star Weekend with the regular cars. Why?
Yeah.
It's at Bristol this year. Why can't you invite guys from ARCA and all that and do a showcase race? But I guess if you invited all the guys from ARCA, you'd have 20 cars. So
That's why
Yeah.
you look at the other points that are available, like we talked about with Peyton with the All American Series, to see what other championships are available, and you ask those champions to come out and be involved, and it'd make it more interesting because obviously, especially with looking at some of the schedules of like how it evolved with the East and the West Series and North and the West Series as well, like how many road races are run. There's a lot of diversity in the tracks that they visit. So I think, an all-star showcase doesn't just have to be on an oval for this kind of division, which is cool to me. It's more progressive than a lot of other divisions, but, even with it being absorbed into ARCA, it's kind of like lost a little bit of allure to me. So it's going to depend on what happens in the future, man. But, this was a great thing to be around for. It was a great time to see this. I remember when it jumped to 250 laps and like you had this and the super late model and the late model race. It's like, oh my goodness, how am I going to watch all this racing in one night? Because it was a long night because it was already on West Coast time. So it was a crazy
luckily
event.
it gets dark at 5:30 in January. So like the race started. The first race was at like 6. So
Yeah.
but still like 9
Well, I mean,
p.m. Eastern.
I was about to say
like,
9. It's already 9 o'clock over here, man. Like, it doesn't matter.
Like I don't know what I'm gonna do next weekend because like V8 Supercars comes back in Australia, and I've been without road racing for a while, and I'm like I should probably watch it, but I'm gonna have to stay up till 4 in the morning to watch it. So but we'll see.
Just might have to wake up the next day and watch it on YouTube again.
I might have to.
Yeah.
But you know what, guys? Thanks so much for tuning in to this episode of Flashback to the Track. If you want to follow either of us on social media, you can follow me, Mark, at FaxNASCAR on Twitter, where I post all of my fun NASCAR facts. Also, follow the podcast on Twitter. It's at flashback_track. I'm going to start posting more fun video clips there and all kinds of different things that are not fact-based, just like cool stuff that we found that we think is interesting. And James, where can people follow you?
You can follow me at I Want to Believe NASCAR. Just search it on all of your major social media platforms and you'll find me. And search Flashback Track on Instagram, where you can find the same lovable content you find everywhere else.
Exactly. Give us a follow. Shout out. We will do this. We'll shout out one more time to our friends at Blue Emu who sent us a big box of free stuff. If you're looking for any sort of pain reliever, Blue Emu is the way to go. All natural. Get yourself some of that product. Dave Despain approves of it. So does Brian Refner. James and I approve of it. So check it out. But thanks so much, guys, and we will see you in the next episode.